It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
Hello everybody, I am here with Dr. Laura LaJoie from Joy of Life Chiropractic, and one of my dear friends that you were one of the first people I met when I came to Wilsonville.
Yeah, that's right.
7 years ago. So if you don't know Dr. Laura, she is one of the most loving and caring people and a phenomenal leader that we have here in Wilsonville. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're involved in Wilsonville, and just I think I want to get out just like how you live your life, because I think that's an important part of who you are and how you lead.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm a chiropractor here in town, and I've been here for over 25 years. I've had the good fortune to work with Wildcat athletes on the sidelines for football games, and then I treat athletes in the clinic if they get injured. I work directly with the athletic trainer at the high school and the coaches, and that's just one of my favorite things to do, is to work with these kids. I see a lot of pediatrics from the age of 4 days old to, my oldest patient's 98. And so I like to teach people how they live their life through their nervous system, and the importance of being able to take care of your health in every way that you can control. One of my favorite things to do in the clinic is to have dance parties. We have times that are happy, and literally every day for me is like, today's Happy Thursday. So
theme days in the clinic, we've seen plenty of those.
I have so many theme days in the clinic. I like to make sure that we're having fun and that we're leaning into what joyful living is like. Even though that there's pain and suffering that you're dealing with, or you might feel anxious or depressed, I think one of the things that's really true for me is that positivity is a choice. Like I have a coat rack that hangs inside the door right when you walk in the clinic, and anything that's bothering me, I hang it up there because it doesn't belong there. I care so deeply about people, whether it's in my clinic or my family or even on my street, and people realize that, because life matters.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about that a little bit more, the idea of joyful living, given the current climate that we have. We have a pandemic going on, we have a lot of tension in our communities and our nation. How does that play out for you, and how do you impact that onto others during this particular climate?
It's very difficult, and I really feel for the people that are already anxious or already fearful, because this is really hard. The way that it plays out for me is that I get up every day, and the first thing I do before I even get out of bed is I thank God for the life that I have, and the children that I get to raise, and the husband that I get to be best friends with. And I just have to make every day about being the best me that day. And what I've come to learn is that we have a personal responsibility to our own health, and to be able to safely connect with the people in our community, and that there's a lot of people out there that are either alone or they're afraid. We've had opportunities where I came to a point where I'm like, how do I connect the people that I care about right now? And I realized that my aunt, who's 1,000 miles away, or my mom, who's 3,000 miles away, or my best friend from high school, who's 3,000 miles away, they're also suffering in this. And so I happened to pull out a drawer of stationery, and I put out on Facebook, anybody want to receive a letter in the mail? And I literally sat down and wrote handwritten cards or letters to people just to say I care and not to focus on the pandemic, but to let them know what I value in them. And I think that we have to be able to value people. As far as the Black Lives Matter stuff, I mean, that is huge. It's really sparked controversy and pain, and also I think out of this we have to say awareness. You know, awareness is really important. But I think that there's also a lot of pain that's coming to the surface. So, you know, I feel like it's our responsibility to try to understand the people that live across the street or that live in the apartments down the block.
Sure.
I think that the most important thing that I've done for me and my family is to just lean into what we can control in terms of how we treat people and how we handle our own health.
So one of the things you talked about was listening and understanding. That's one of the things that we're trying to highlight this week is how do we as citizens of Wilsonville become better citizens, better community members, better neighbors of each other, especially when it comes to how do we become a more inclusive, more diverse community, which we're not really right now. I mean, we have, like you and I were talking about, we kind of live in a bubble. So how do we pop that bubble a little bit and become more engaged? Can you share a little bit about the work that you were doing just to be a better listener and to learn more?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the most important thing is if you don't know the answer to a question and you don't understand why everybody's upset, like I do live in a bubble. I mean, Wilsonville is like Pleasantville, and not everybody feels that way, but I would say that the majority of people do once they've been here for a while. And I've been here for 25 years, so I mean, it's a long time to become very comfortable in being comfortable. And I was invited last week to lead a conversation on racism with my Rotary Club. And we are all about diversity and inclusion and equity and making sure that people are served by their community. So we do service projects. Yeah. We work with athletes, we work with families, we work with the Wilsonville Food Bank.
Women at the prison.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, through a child's eyes. I mean, we bring programs to the women's prison for them and their children. And so when I was doing this conversation on racism last week for the Rotary Club, I needed to do more research and I needed to understand how is this really affecting people in our community, because it doesn't personally affect me. And I know that I'm not a racist in that I try to treat everybody equally. I expect everyone to be respectful and fair and good until they prove me otherwise. Now there's some jerks that live in our community, no doubt, but that doesn't make it right for me to be a jerk to somebody else. So when I was doing this conversation, I reached out to a girl that I had coached in soccer years ago, and she's in her 20s now. And I asked her, she's Asian, I'm like, how does this affect you? And she's been really struggling with it. Her mom had been struggling with it. Like, they feel like they have to be Americanized in order to be able to show up in this community. And I had no idea the struggle that they were dealing with. You know, I reached out to a kid who graduated from Wilsonville High School who's black, who is a phenomenal soccer player. He's going to be going to an academy in London to play professional soccer. I had no idea when they moved here from Jamaica. Like, I think you have to show up and make sure that you're asking good questions, being completely open to the answer, and not asking questions in order to fight, but to learn. And so, like, when they had the Black Lives Matter rally here in Wilsonville, I came because I needed to learn what people were feeling around me that I wasn't understanding. When we had a chance after the people spoke, we went and we walked down the street, and I was able to have a conversation with a black mother. And I said, how is this conversation affecting you and your family? And she said, well, when we moved here, we realized that we were one of the only black families in Wilsonville. And we felt very included to a point. There were times and places where we were still experiencing roadblocks because of the color of our skin, and it was very clear. And I'm not saying there's no racism in Wilsonville, because now I know there is, but I didn't really understand it until I started asking questions. And I think once we start to talk to people about how they're feeling, as long as you're coming from a place of grace, they're willing to open up, because they know that you're not going to use it against them. You're going to use it for the better good.
Yeah, one of the things, the best explanations I've heard, and I think you heard this person speak too, about changing the paradigm from white privilege to white centeredness. Like, I never thought about it before. Like, everything in our culture is centered around what it means to be right around whiteness, right? How close can you be to the white? How you talk, how you look, how you dress around white culture, and that was a perspective I'd never heard before, and I really appreciated that. So how do you think, though, after learning and listening, what do you think that we can do as people who aren't people of color, who don't have a lot of diversity when it comes to the rest of our community? How do we act? How do we engage? I mean, we've done the first step, right? We've listened, we've educated ourselves, but now what?
Growing up in LA, it was a total diversity melting pot where I was growing up. And so I had friends of every race, ethnicity, every color, male, female, and it was never even a question about who your friends were.
Yeah.
If they were kind and good people, and I hung out with the athletes and the smart kids, and those were my people. We have to be able to take a stand because we believe this, or we have to be able to educate ourselves because we don't understand this.
Yeah.
And I think that the undercurrent of all of this that's happening is that the world has expanded so rapidly to be a global community that we have to be willing to be open and understanding of other cultures and other people.
And expand our circles, right? That's the biggest thing that Rachel and I have been trying to focus on, is expanding our circles, just being influenced by people from diverse backgrounds, and exposing our daughters to that too, because it's so important to us. You are a strong woman leader in Wilsonville. We need strong women leadership anywhere, in any setting, but that's something that you really focus on too, empowering girls, empowering young women to be business owners, to be leaders in whatever circle that may be in. So talk a little bit about that and your perspective on that and what that means to you in terms of working to empower young women in our community.
Yeah, that is one of the most important things to me. I have 3 daughters. One's out of college, one's in college, and one's going to be a senior this year. My middle daughter started the Girls Empowerment Club with a friend when she was in high school.
Yeah.
They did work to raise money for girls in South Africa that didn't have schooling, and they were able to raise several $1,000s, and they put on a women's self-defense class where they invited mothers and daughters to learn from women how to defend themselves physically if they ever needed to. And it's been really important to me to lean into that female empowerment conversation. Feminism isn't about bra burning and being better or having more. Feminism, just like racism, is about having equity and being able to have an equal voice. I've leaned into a lot of the women's conversations right now. We're excited to celebrate that this is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, the women's right to vote. And I have 3 daughters that are all going to get to vote this year. And so I don't want them to just randomly vote for women. I want them to be able to get educated on who are the candidates, what are the issues, why is this important to me, and make intelligent choices so that their vote matters because they cared enough. And if they don't care enough to learn about it, I don't want them to vote.
Right.
But I want every man and woman who is able to get out there and get their voter's registration, do it. Because that's the only way that you get to have a choice. I think that as women, we have an opportunity because as mothers, we are raising young men and women along with our partners who are able to have a voice, who are able to have the service-oriented nature where you care about somebody else. I think that one of the most important things that I've taught my girls is that there's people all around you that are different. And the only way to understand is ask questions, but it's important to be of service and make sure that you are putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding before you pass judgment, because there's so many things that happen in a person's life that we never really have an opportunity to understand unless you ask. And if they don't want to talk to you, they'll tell you. And when they're done with the depth of the conversation, that's fair, and they may be willing to come back to it. But a lot of people need to process what they're thinking, and we just have to be open to those conversations.
I just want to hit on one last thing before we wrap up. We're both parents. You're much further along in that journey than I am, but I would say, knowing you and your family, you've done a great job of raising 3 strong young girls who think for themselves, who are creative, who have done really awesome things to better this community and the community they've gone into after high school. But what do you think, as it relates to all of the conversations that we're having right now, diversity, inclusion, equity, what do you think the best thing, what would be your recommendation for parents, especially for young parents, right, who are at the very beginning of their journey and trying to really impact and mold their children at the stage that they're in? What's the best thing that we can do right now in terms of engaging our young children?
I think that if your kids are asking you questions and you don't know the answer, go and do the research with them. you commented that you got some books for your girls.
Yeah.
I think that there are books on every study, every subject, and across every level of education.
Yeah.
And
Age appropriate.
Right.
Even
and
for young children.
Right. So we want to make sure that we're educating our children, and in that we end up educating ourselves. We want to make sure that they are forming an opinion based on facts, not based on rhetoric. Anytime that our kids say something that sounds racist or sounds sexist, or we just know that there's more information that they can glean, we'll ask them why they think that. So don't be afraid to ask your child what makes you think that, so that you can help to expand their knowledge.
Even if you think it's the right thing, I think sometimes,
Right.
why do you think that? Just so they have an understanding of, this is what I believe and this is why.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the conversation, even between spouses or friends, being able to say, why do you think that, is a respectful conversation. It doesn't have to be a challenging conversation.
No.
But I think with our children, the most important thing that we have to remember is that their brains are learning and growing at lightning speed. And they really just want to understand. So you have to be able to lean into those thoughts that you believe in and that you want to do. I mean, one of the reasons why you touched on being involved in service in the community. One of the reasons that I love being involved with Rotary is that it is not a political organization. It is not a religious organization, and we come together for the purpose of community service locally and globally.
Yeah.
So when you talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, I think that being involved with clubs like that also help you to anchor yourself in being open, because you know that some of those topics are off limits in that circle.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice to be in a circle where you can't talk about that stuff.
Exactly. I think that's very true. We have I think in terms of thought and perspective, we have a very diverse group in Rotary.
Yeah.
Young and old and all sides of the political spectrum, but we don't talk about all sides of the religious spectrums, and we don't talk about that, right? Because it is a space where our intention is to come together for community and service, and I like that, even though we have that diversity there. So, well, thank you. I love you dearly. I respect your leadership and your perspective and the influence you have in this community, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of Wilsonville Wednesdays this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hello, Tack. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Deputy McKluskey from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office and Wilsonville Police. She is our school resource officer for the whole Wilsonville school system. So 4,500 kids is what you said. Yeah.
A lot of kids.
So, a lot of kids. But I just wanted to invite her into this conversation that we're having to talk about how our local police force is engaging in this conversation of diversity, inclusion, equity in our community, and just being better community members, and especially in our schools. So you want to just first give a little bit of introduction about who you are and what you do and how you see your role play into that in our community?
Yeah, so like you said, I've got about 4,500 kids that I'm interacting with all the way from kindergarten through high school. And so the topic of equity, inclusion, and diversity, that's been in the forefront for years. In law enforcement, we interact with everybody in our community. We provide services, we are a resource. So that's kind of the great part about being a school resource officer, is that's the main role, is being a resource. So law enforcement, that's a portion of what I do, but a ton of what I do is engaging with kids from all different backgrounds and really being like a mentor, answering questions. And so I'm really fortunate that I get to engage with youth, because youth are, they're great because they will talk about anything. They're not afraid of hard topics, they're not afraid of taboos, and they're innovative. They have questions, they have ideas, and they want to be heard, and they also want to ask questions. A lot of us adults are kind of afraid to ask questions or engage because we want to be experts, and kids are willing to say, hey, I don't know about this, but it doesn't feel right, or it doesn't look right. How can we be better? How can we change? And then they'll bring forth their ideas. So.
Awesome. And you were talking to me a little bit about even outside of your role in the schools, representing the Sheriff's Office in a wider sense when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Can you talk a little bit about those events?
Yes.
and how the Sheriff's Office and you yourself are involved in those?
Yes, so this year I think was going to be my third or fourth year participating in Portland Pride, which is just an incredible event. Portland has such a well-established event there, and a ton of our Clackamas County members and community members, they're there. So I'm interacting with our community and our neighbors while I'm there, which it's just wonderful to meet people at an event where maybe they don't expect to see me, where I'm saying, hey, I'm here for you. And so that's been a great opportunity to represent. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in young people, And that's something that we can't ignore. It's a hard, heavy topic that is not fun, but is absolutely our responsibility to be trained in. And then children that come from marginalized communities or the LGBTQ community, they are more likely to experience that. And again, we can't ignore that. That's something that is our responsibility as adults to keep our kids safe. Last winter, had a great opportunity with law enforcement, school administration, community members, and city. I think there were city council members there doing a panel with kids, youth from Westland and Wilsonville high schools and RTech from all different backgrounds, all the different socioeconomic brackets, different ethnicities. So they all have these different perspectives that they're sharing, and the panel was great because they were telling us about what it is like to live in Westland and Wilsonville. And so I got to hear from these kids their personal experience and things that we can do better and things that we're doing well. And it was really great because overwhelmingly we were told law enforcement is doing a great job, and I believe that we are. This current conversation is something that law enforcement's been having for a decade. You talked to me about that you can't wait, and that was like this big topic that's coming up. And I'm proud to say that Clackamas County Sheriff's Office in Wilsonville, those are great ideas, and in spirit we've been following those for about a decade,
That's awesome.
maybe longer.
Yeah. Well, your community is proud of you too. We were so blessed to have such a great police department here locally, and the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office as a whole too. So we feel very blessed about that. So when you talk about the current situation, right? There's just a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension, right? A lot of stress right now with being stuck at home or not being able to work. And all the other racial, political tension, all that kind of stuff. How do you suggest the community as a whole get involved in just helping to protect each other, to engage with each other, and make Wilsonville a better place to live?
So when we first experienced like the COVID lockdowns and people being stuck at home, as law enforcement, our big push was we need to get out, and we need to make sure that we're out in neighborhoods, out in parks, and we're still seeing people. We wanted to remind our community we are still here.
Yeah.
We are your resource. We have not abandoned you. Like we will keep you safe, and we're here for you. Even while maintaining social distance, we can still connect. We can still show that we see each other and that we respect each other and that we're here for each other.
Exactly.
So that would be like one of my top recommendations as a community, is that we don't think about like all of our political divides or just our physical distance from each other, and that we really focus on, as we're seeing each other out in the community, is like, hi, I see you, how are you?
Yeah.
Like just remembering to connect.
That's a simple question, right?
Despite being quarantined, we still live in a great community. We care about each other. And so I would say that as far as connecting with people and showing each other that we care is really just to show up for that at our 6-foot distance and say, how are you? I've been talking to some of our inclusion and equity groups locally to try to be part of that conversation. I think that's super important that law enforcement, we stay connected and we stay part of the conversation, because I'm not only here to speak, like I'm really here to listen, because I police at the will of our community, and so I need to know what our community wants from me, because I'm part of it. I'm not, I'm a representative from this community, and so yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you mentioned that one of the goals of the police department early on was to be out and being present, and I know my family personally benefited from that. My daughter had a drive-by birthday party that you guys participated in.
Great.
I've seen multiple of those.
Yes, lots
you guys
of
were
birthdays.
present at the neighborhood parades and the 4th of July celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you and appreciate the police department for engaging and making sure that community stays intact, even during this time where we're social distancing. So
Great.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being part of this conversation. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to say as yourself or as a representative of the police department?
I just want to say that I care so much about Wilsonville. I'm, again, so thankful to work here. And I just want people to remember we are a resource. It's not just when a crime is occurring or something terrible is happening or in crisis. Like, we're absolutely there for that. But we're also there for, if when you see us, say hi, have a conversation, let us know how you're doing. And we can also be a resource to connect people to whatever they need. If people are having issues with housing or food or, getting places they need to go, we can help try to figure out problem solving. So don't forget that we're there for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week. We really appreciate you being part of this conversation on Wilsonville Wednesdays.
Garet, thank you for joining us for Wilsonville Wednesdays. We really appreciate your contributions. And you're a fairly new resident to Wilsonville, just been here a couple of years, and already have done a lot to see what you think needs to be done to improve Wilsonville. So thank you for that. Thank you for your commitment as a volunteer in our city.
No problem.
So, do you want to just give us a little bit of a background about who you are and maybe tell us a little bit? We know that you have a kind of a lifestyle community involvement blog, Garet in Wilsonville, that we've seen. So do you want to just give us a little bit of background about who you are and tell us a little bit about your blog?
Yeah, well, first, I just love the different stages of beard growth we all represent here today.
There you go.
We're 9 people short of a calendar, so maybe we'll put this together at the end of the year.
There we go.
About 7 years ago, I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and we had a couple move in as our neighbors. I was a teacher at the time and just about to get into urban planning school. And those neighbors were from Wilsonville, Oregon, and they were there to go to medical school. And so over those 6-7 years in medical school, these neighbors became really a part of our family. And we knew at the end of that schooling, they were going to move back to Oregon. And we had to decide between a place that we really loved, Richmond, Virginia, and moving back to the Northwest, or trying this new adventure west. And so we chose the people. And I really love that they went to an absolutely wonderful community here in Wilsonville. And I'm happy to say we were both able to find housing in Wilsonville. And we now live in the Villebois neighborhood right down the street from them. It's as a child where I grew up in some of the poorest and richest schools in Ohio, and just seeing that like inequality in education where my kind of lower income school was very much like predominantly Black, immigrant, Jewish culture population. But we received some really poor quality education. You didn't necessarily know it at the time, but then when my father lost his job and we actually moved out to a community like Wilsonville that was in the more suburban area outside of Cleveland, we ended up going to one of the more richest school systems in the state. And so just seeing that access to opportunity and being in that place, but then losing kind of the cultural and racial diversity because that school is about 99% white, really has stuck with me.
Can you just talk a little bit about the work you've done and the advocacy you've done for our community, to our city council, and other leaders in our city government to work on this equitable housing plan for Wilsonville?
Sure, and I'll start, and Ben, you can jump in there. Just to quickly ground it in that story, when we moved out to the kind of the richer community with the nicer schools, the way we were able to afford housing there was for my bedroom to be our living room for a couple of years, and for a couple of cousins also to come live in our house. And so the idea of how key housing is to like education opportunity in rich kind of resourced neighborhoods is something that's always stuck with me. And so how I work like and learn about a community is to pick a topic and investigate it. And so and this can be even it doesn't have to be like that difficult for people to do. I applied to be on the Equitable Housing Task Force. I wasn't selected, but I just showed up to the meetings anyways and started to write about it.
Hold on, I feel like though you were part of it. I wish you were, yes. But you were there and you contributed. In my mind, you were part of it.
One of my top talents besides hair growth is showing up in physical places. So it's not
just showing up, making it happen.
And so it's over that time, I ended up talking to about 20 different people throughout the community, a lot of people who were on the task force, city council people who've been through some of the housing battles that have happened in Wilsonville. And so through that, I really try to use that, and then the interviews with people that I did who are in most need, the single parent families, our Latinx community, our people of color, our lower income families, to really lead my analysis. And so between doing that and writing about it, and hopefully writing about it in a way where it gets more people interested and engaged, no matter where they're at on the political spectrum, is kind of what my ethic is. And so that's kind of what I did. And then it ended up in June, unanimously 5-0 on council, passed the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan. And so hopefully now as the city as we were directed to look at our largest gaps when it comes to housing for race and income and other types of gaps, we got a good plan in place to kind of charge forward for that.
You were, as just a citizen who just saw something they cared about and really engaging with us, emailing us. I mean, we talked outside my house when you're walking with the new baby and your wife and the dog, and we would have conversation. You reached out to me. We've talked at the task force. So Garet is really taking on a leadership role in the community to make sure that there's a platform for people that maybe have historically been marginalized, to make sure that they have a voice not only in the city government, but how policy is directed, and to make sure it's good policy that impacts people in a positive way. And Garet's been neighborly and wonderful, and he's been just a leader in this. And so it's been a pleasure on what little bit we've been able to do with the Equitable Task Force to find those common grounds and to be able to work together on issues that really matter. And I think we'll make Wilsonville an example, show leadership on these issues, and willing to be a good voice on things that are really kind of hotbed things going on across the country and the region right now. And I find that Garet's activity has been really unifying, I think, for a lot of people in the community. And so that's been a pleasure to work with you. Just, as somebody that's a member of the LGBT community that's fought for civil rights, being a marriage equality plaintiff, and then working with that population, especially with my foster care advocacy, and now making sure that there's good housing for everybody and we develop in a way that's inclusive. I love that overlap. We come from different worlds, but I love the overlap that I've been able to have with Garet and work with him in the community.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, from my very limited engagement and interaction on this issue, I just feel like it's an issue that tackles so many other things that are important about making Wilsonville an inclusive place, right? We talk about the socioeconomic diversity, we talk about racial diversity, we talk about all these things that finding and creating equitable housing is encompassing of all those other things. So I think it's such an important thing for our city to act on in order to become a better place to live. But I guess my question for you guys would be, what are the one or two biggest pitfalls that you see currently that you were able to put out in this task force, and then the plan that the city council approved? And what do you think are like the number one or two priorities that Wilsonville needs to act on first to move in a good direction towards this? Yeah.
So I think one of the pieces, in addition to like approving this piece of paper, really that's what what the plan was. The city is going to work towards setting up this equity commission to really work on those more longer term issues. And so I think like how we support that commission, how we resource it, the direction we give it within the city is going to be a really key piece to making sure that we, whether it's housing or transportation or policing or those, like you're saying, Kyle, like housing is just a window into these other conversations, job access that is intertwined into it. And then I think the other kind of challenge and hurdle that we need to just do, and this is more on less of the like policy change, but more of the conversations that need to be had, is the idea that like we've done enough for like rental housing or low income housing in Wilsonville, and so we need to make only like higher income single family neighborhoods. I think there's like a group within Wilsonville or a mindset that we've already done enough. We can't, housing's regional, and so we should just give up like trying to make more mixed income neighborhoods. And I think that to me is a way I would not want us to go, that I think it's more exclusive than inclusive, because the inclusive direction is to say, let's build upon this good history we have with protecting the mobile home parks that we have here, with having apartments integrated into neighborhoods with single family homes and townhomes and other pieces. And so that mindset, that shift, in addition to this like more formalized committee, I think are the two big issues, at least that I see on the horizon.
We have people who often aren't represented in our government, our boards, or commissions, and making sure that the government is available to them and their concerns are being heard, especially around policing, housing, social services, parks and rec, anything, all of it. I want, and I know the rest of the council really wants to hear from those people. As we create more equitable housing, my big goal is policy-wise is, can we make sure it's close to essential services, transit, and places where it makes the most sense. So be really thoughtful and mindful with how we do that type of development.
Well, thank you both for all you've done to act on this important issue. I think it's only the beginning, right? There's a lot of work to be done, but it's amazing to see what's come out of just, this task force and the engagement that we've seen there. And even from the non-task force member, right? But
showing up.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to make sure that you want to highlight as part of this conversation before we wrap up?
Just that Garet in Wilsonville.com. That's where I do my writing. You can sign up for email updates. I think the kind of the issue of housing, I'll be following that, but also some of the policing work. And then I also just kind of looking at the diversity within our faith community. So I kind of frame the website as our schools, neighborhoods, and our places of worship, and looking
Awesome.
at the racial divides there and writing into that. So always looking for feedback and engagement, and just to learn more about Wilsonville.
Well, thanks, Garet.
Thanks for rocking the beards.
Yeah,
The 3 beards.
the beard team.
The beard amigos. Thank you, man. And thank you once again. It's been great to get to know you over just through city stuff and being in the community. And congratulations on the new little one in your household. I know that's an exciting time for you and your wife, so congrats on that. And thank you once again for all the energy and effort you give to Wilsonville. It's appreciated.
Yes,
Thanks,
very much so.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Al.
Take care, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us, Trey. Ben and I are chatting today with Trey Hester, who's a resident of Villebois and has done a lot of work around creating community conversation and engagement surrounding how we can be better neighbors to each other and have a more inclusive community. So, Trey, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about who you are and just how the idea of having these community meetings started?
Trey Hester. I was born and raised here in Portland, Oregon, Southeast Portland. Went to Milwaukee High School, 2 years at Mount Hood Community College, and then finished up at University of Oregon.
Uh-oh. All right, well, you have the right to wear that shirt then, I guess.
So I spent most of my years living in Selwood, Southeast Portland and Selwood. Moved to Milwaukee for a bit, moved to Tiger, then we moved here to Wilsonville. I work at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, where I'm a correctional corporal now. I've worked for the Department of Corrections for 12 years, but I've worked in Wilsonville for over 8 years. Lives here, just finished up 3 years living here. The idea of this event that we planned, the first one, basically came from a thread from Facebook on the Villebois page, the Villebois Hood. A person had made a comment or a post about All Lives Matter. And you know how these things go. People start responding, and it becomes becomes heated dialogue, or could become a storm. But really, after just reviewing people's comments and whatnot, I just basically commented, "Hey, who's willing to have a face-to-face conversation, i.e., discussion, and put your money where your mouth is." I mean, you say that you're open. You say that you respect people's opinions. Let's talk about this stuff. And then it just kind of caught on. We had about, I would say, 35. Well, the teacher would say 40, but I'd probably say more like 35. I mean, I didn't do a head count, but it was a really good turnout. And I had 3 guest speakers who spoke. I kind of opened it up. We did a moment of silence. First guest speaker was a man named Joe Bean Bryant. He's a resident of North Portland. His son was killed by a Portland police officer back in 1996. And so he spoke, been an activist for like over 20 years. Second person was my friend Rob Ward. He's a retired Multnomah County Sheriff's deputy after 25 years. Was a victim of a brutal assault by a offender and lived through it. He lives in Westland, and he's done some community work in Westland also, all in the wake of what happened to my good friend, Michael Fester. And the third person I had speak was my good friend, Terry Cummings. She is a city council member in Westland, and me and her have became really good friends, and she's a really good person. And She talked about just what led up to the things that led up to what happened with Michael Fester, and just like when they found out, the steps she took to rectify it, and the politics that played in that. And after that, we opened it up for a community forum, and a lot of people spoke, and it was really good, really good. And I was very proud of what we did. I was very proud of who showed up, and I was very happy with the turnout.
You moved to, I mean, Portland's already not a very diverse city. It's a very, it just isn't. I mean, the state as a whole just isn't. That's not the demographic that lives here. I think part of that's due to the early history of Oregon, and Oregon was not really welcoming to any people of color at all, and it didn't really change until the 40s in the shipyards in the Second World War, and then after integrating after segregation, the West Coast began, those things begin to move. So, and the migration up from California. So, but now you moved to Wilsonville, and we're neighbors. I live in Villebois. We're neighbors, and I'm curious about your lived experience in this city. One of the big conversations we're having as a council is, and that I fully support, is that we need to have, a lot of our surveys don't capture people that we want to also see involved in government. When we see, oh, the city is doing great and people love this city and they feel great about the city. Well, a lot of those people don't even have children. They make over $100,000 a year. They don't have the same lived experience as somebody that doesn't have a lot of those benefits, or that's not their lot in life. And so we don't often get to hear from people who don't always fit, the nuclear family, the picket fence, like the majority of Wilsonville. So I'm curious about your lived experience living here. And do you feel like you have good access and have availability to engage in the city and city policy issues and around these topics that we're having now around racial equality, battling any type of police brutality, talking about policy issues to make sure that people are safer around policing, all those big topic issues that we're addressing now?
So far, my experience living in Wilsonville has been great. I slowly but surely, I'm loving it down here. I really loved living in Selwood. I was there for over 13 years. And sometimes I kind of miss it, but I like Wilsonville. I wish Wilsonville had more mom and pop restaurants. We just don't have a lot of mom and pop restaurants where you can get some good home cooked, wholesome meals. But you go to you got places like the Screen Door. You got all those little mom and pops restaurants that people just love, like the food carts. It would be so cool to have a food court area in Wilsonville, and just stuff like that.
The Town Center Development Task Force, and this is going to be like probably a 15, 20-year process. The part of what we recommended in that whole plan for Town Center as it redevelops is a food cart pod. So that's my dream someday too, is that we have something like that where it's centralized people. And also one of the pushes that we made in those recommendations to the council was we need more local business. Yeah, you have to have big box retail to support it, but we need more locally owned, mom and pop type restaurants, especially.
Yes.
But businesses in general. So
it'd be nice if there was some incentives given out to people of color to open businesses down here. Just stuff like that. The talk about Frog Pond. And I remember driving out there when the houses were starting being built, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, these are some ritzy houses. I mean, you can have a whole community here. And then to hear that how that went down, it was just kind of odd that a select few of people were able to say, hey, no, this is what we want. It seems kind of odd to me. I look at Frog Pond, I'm like, man, that could be a whole community where you can bring people of color in, or you can just bring diversity. I think Wilsonville wants to work towards that, right? And eventually I think Wilsonville will get there. Obviously it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's a continuous marathon. I love it here. I've been treated good here. I haven't had any issues with law enforcement or anything. I mean, I'm in law enforcement, and I kind of know the code, right? I grew up in Portland, and I've been racially profiled, harassed, handcuffed when they knew I wasn't the guy, and oh, there's a black guy, so he fits the script. I've been through all that, had issues in high school where we fought a group of skinheads for 3 years, only to make them quit school, and our high school administration wouldn't acknowledge that there was a problem until there was. But for me, going through all that, the thing is, like me and my twin brother, we just kept pushing on.
Right on the nose on a few things, like in that you have really good instincts about what's going on in the city. The frog pond thing happened with the bigger houses in the Street of Dreams because Wilsonville actually outperforms the rest of the state in multi-housing and density housing, and that includes apartments and townhomes and things like that. So to bring some balance to the building and where it was located away from services, Metro allowed for larger lots on that part. You won't see lots that large in the rest of Frog Pond most likely as we go and do the master plan further east and south by the Meridian School. And so those single family homes were allowed basically because we had already met such a high bar for a lot of different diversity of housing. One thing I'm advocating for, and I think that you would agree with this, is because I think you're right on the nose, is when we bring in that housing and that brings more diversity, especially if people don't lack cars or they don't have easy transportation, but maybe they cottage clusters or affordable housing, or you're offering this thing, those higher density housings make much more sense closer to city services. So town center, like Kyle had just said, over there by the Smart Transit Center, we own 4 acres as a city right there. So it's a perfect spot to put like really nice, well done, like affordable housing that we're talking about doing right there. And making sure that we have housing that allows people, and I also am really big on focusing on home ownership. And so allowing people that are young working professionals, maybe young families, to be able to have that opportunity and find creative ways to allow them to have a piece of the American pie and that dream of home ownership and creating wealth for themselves, right? And that's wealth they can even pass on to their children, and making sure those populations that don't traditionally have access to that have access to that. We were founded as a nation. We did not afford the promise of the Declaration of Independence to all people. The first principles were inscribed and they were founded, but we did not extend that to all people in our country. We did not live up to the very document that we created to found our country, right? America had never happened before. It was a unique new experience. America was a new idea. There's a bunch of monarchs and everybody running around the world, but there wasn't an America yet. And we, for a long time in many parts of our history, and we all know about it, had got it wrong. But one thing that I do think is that we as a people, because we're a moral people, continue to struggle to live to those ideals. And like President Obama said, to become a more perfect union. He's not the only president to say that, but you hear that all the time. And we're continually striving to live to those great ideals that were put pen to paper and helped found America so many years ago. And I hope now, and I believe now, even in spite of all this, my son will inherit a better America than I did. That's my goal as a parent. I know that would be everybody on this, I'm pretty sure it's all of our goals. So that young people would inherit a better America, a more equal America, a more just America, better equal protections under the law, truly providing equal rights and equality in that manner. And it's just a difficult time right now. And so I really appreciate that you and your family chose Wilsonville to be your home, and Wilsonville's better for it. And I'm super appreciative that you're engaging in the community in a way that some people don't think they have time for, but you're finding time for it. And I think it's fantastic.
And I'm not gonna speak for all Black people, but I will say that I like to think that all we want is an equal opportunity. We want the benefit of the doubt, and we want a chance at the slice of a pie. And we want to be able to do things and not have our motives questioned. They're for the same thing that everybody else is: to do business, to shop, to spend money, to sell. Wilsonville's working towards that, and like you said, it's going to be a 15, 20-year thing. But again, it's always a marathon. To me, it's always a continuous marathon. It never ends.
It will be a 15 or 20-year thing, but we will also have more equitable housing before then. Like that is a commitment that will be happening. I mean, at least while I'm on the council, we will be having more equitable housing for the next 15 to 20 years. It's not an option.
Appreciate that.
What thought was the biggest takeaway from the first community meeting? Like what was the biggest positive or thing that you saw come out of it?
I would say the biggest takeaway from the June 20th event was just the start of building a community. These same people, a lot of the same people that were there have friended me on Facebook, reached out to me on Facebook, and just people showed up and they spoke from their heart, and people listened, and people had the courage to, say, hey, there are things I didn't know, and there are biases that I had that have been crushed now, and that's the biggest takeaway for me is just people coming out, listening, being amongst each other. And for me, if you can meet somebody and build, foster a relationship, that's also too what I want. I want people to build relationships, start relationships, and wherever that goes, that's what I want. And so now on to our next event. Our next event, we call it RACE, Real Action Community Event. It's going to be Saturday, August 15th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Mountain View Park, right here in the Billboard neighborhood. And it's not a Billboard thing; it's a Wilsonville thing. And that's one thing I want to make sure that's clear. It's at a park here in Wilsonville or Billboard, but it's a Wilsonville thing. And
so what about kids and families? What do you think? Is this a kids and family event? Can I bring my son?
Yes.
Can people bring their families?
Oh, yes. Please bring your family, bring your kids. And also too, when it's open mic time, I encourage young people to come up and speak, and tell us how you feel, tell us your thoughts. It's not just for adult. Hopefully, each individual could take something away from that for themselves. Again, I'm gonna bring back Joe Bean Keller, have him speak. I have one of my old lieutenants, Lester Kaiser. I'm hoping that he will come and attend and maybe say a couple words. Looking at my counselor, John Wolf, he does a lot of work with Portland Police. He's part of the Coalition of Black Men, and just a great guy. I'm hoping that he'll come and share some words. I asked a friend of mine, Anthony Blake. We call him Brother Love. And then after that, we are looking to have people come up and speak. And we want more people to come out, and we want people to come up and speak. And again, hear each other out, build community, the networking piece, and just people fostering relationships.
We often we hear stereotypes and they invade everything, unfortunately. But like when you build relationships, stereotypes have no power, right?
Exactly.
So when you become invested in another human being, all of a sudden the stereotypes and everything else that may have been clouding your ability to relate to other people that are different than you, all of that just melts away. It just all of a sudden. You are the same person with DNA, flesh and blood, and you're in the same struggle of life. And you see a lot, I feel like that a lot of the key in my life as a gay man and what I teach my son, and I'm sure, you've experienced this, is as you begin to cross those barriers and there's an olive branch, and then there's love, and then there's respect, and then there's just a conversation. I feel like that's the model that's happening here in Wilsonville, and that you're kind of spearheading. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and hopefully this inspires other people to start doing things.
Son, how to identify that, respond with character, and respond appropriately, and I believe that will carry him through. And also to be a vanguard, and somebody says, we don't do that to people. We don't treat people that way. We're not okay with that. I don't care who you are. That's not how we treat people. And so I think. That's a life lesson I think our country is relearning again right now. It's conversations like this that are just open and getting to know different people from different stripes and walks of life and all of that. But I enjoy this. And I think it makes our community stronger. now and in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, there's going to be obstacles that come up, and you cannot, I mean, you got two choices. You could let them hold you back, or you can just go through them and keep going. And I mean, life is nothing but obstacles and obstacles on top of obstacles. And that's just how it is. And what you're doing for your son will pay dividends when he gets to an age where, he's living life and doing things, and hopefully he carries the torch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Trey, for joining us on Wilsonville Wednesdays, and thank you for everything that you're doing for Wilsonville and to make our community a better place to be for everybody. So we really appreciate you being part of this conversation and for the work you're doing.
And thank you both for the work you're doing. Thank you for the time, and thanks for keeping an open mind.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this week. We really appreciate your viewership and having a really important conversation with other civic leaders and people that are engaged in the community. We are just really appreciative of you guys tuning in every single week, and thank you again.
Yeah, and thanks to all those leaders who participate in the conversation with us. We appreciate each and every one of you and what you do to make Wilsonville a better place. We hope that you can join us next week. We'll be out at Coal Creek Golf Course, which is out by Sandalede West, checking out a little bit of foot golf and their event space that they have out there. A lot of really cool things that you can do, even during COVID, to be socially distanced, still have quite a bit of fun while you're outside. So we hope you join us next week with Karen Kaiser out at Coal Creek. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.
See you next week, guys.
Live a life less ordinary, live a life extraordinary with me. Live a life less sedentary, live a life evolutionary with me. Well, I hate to be a bother, but it's you and there's no other. I do believe